Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Lead Them Well. This is Family Bible Training. My name is Jeff. We're Two Cities Church. It's July 22nd, and I'm wearing this 2020 one-week t-shirt because we're participating in our community, and if you're connected with Two Cities Church, either in the Chattahoochee Valley or somewhere else around the country or around the world, we hope that this week you are doing a mission project in your community. We hope that you're doing something to love your neighbors and to bless people that are in need and to share Christ with them. So I just wanted you to see the t-shirt and to see that, to let you know that in the middle of this very busy week, where our church is partnering with a few other churches, we're going to pause for just a second and we're going to do what's called Family Bible Training. Now, if you caught this stream for the first time tonight and you're not really sure what this is because you're watching us on Facebook or on Instagram or Twitch or YouTube, this started as a way for families to stay connected in spite of the coronavirus. And really it grew from there. What we're going to do in just a few moments is look at a couple of verses from Scripture. Parents, we're going to ask you, would you commit these verses to memory, and would you help your children commit these verses to memory? Then we created a closed Facebook group. It's closed so that all those creepers out on the internet can't see you, but this closed Facebook group is an opportunity for parents to take a video of your children reciting the Bible verses from memory and then post that onto this closed Facebook group and stay connected with other families in our community or around the country. The details on how to get into that closed Facebook group are going to be in the post or the show notes for this today. But we are studying through, as a church, the first chapter of Genesis. We're going through the 6 days of creation, and you can go back and watch the earlier versions about day 1 and day 2 of creation. Tonight, we're going to be in day 3 of creation. Now, Lead Them Well has a picture of a father teaching the Bible to his child. And we believe that it is a God-given privilege and a responsibility for parents to be able to model their faith for their children. So this whole broadcast tonight is really for you parents. It's designed for you to help put your faith into the heart and soul, literally into the soul of your children, so that when they're older, the Proverbs say, it will not depart, or they will not depart from that faith that they grew up on. This is also a chance for you as a family to come together for a few minutes in the middle of the week and do a little exercise together. And it's all around the Bible. That's why we call it Family Bible Training. Duh. So day 3 of creation, remember, go back and consider the video from day 1 of creation where God made light. Then day 2 of creation where God separated the heavens, plural, the stars in the universe from the heaven that we have in our atmosphere. He separated our atmosphere from the rest of the universe, and really he created all of the rest of the universe in day 2. Day 3 starts in Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to look at 2 verses. It's actually a whole bunch of verses, but I'm not going to ask you to commit a whole bunch of verses to memory tonight. I am going to ask you to commit 2 verses to memory. The first is Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, that tells us big picture of the 3rd day of creation. And then we're also going to memorize Genesis chapter 1, verse 11, that gives us a finer detailed picture of day 3 of creation. So like we do, we'll read the verse, we'll say the verse out loud, and we'll read the verse again, and we'll commit these verses to memory. Genesis chapter 1, verse 9. Then God said, "Let the waters beneath the sky flow together into one place, so the dry ground may appear." And that is what happened. Genesis 1, verse 9. Then we're going to skip over verse 10, but in verse 10 it basically said God gathered all of those waters up. Imagine that water is just all over the place on the earth, and he causes ponds and rivers and lakes and oceans to become assembled in day 3 of creation, which of course causes the land to start to show up. And now that we have water in one spot and land in another, and think about it like God took his finger and drew in the sand. You like how I just did that, drew in the sand, because you'll get it. God took his finger and drew in the sand and said, water, you stay here, land, you stay there, and let's let this line separate where the waters end and the land begins. God called, verse 10 tells us, God called the dry land earth. God called the waters that he assembled together seas. Then verse 11, Genesis 1:11. Then God said, let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant and trees that grow seed bearing fruit. Genesis 1, verse 11. Now, what the Bible tells us next in verses 12 and 13 is that as a result of this, all kinds of plants and bushes and trees grew as a result of God's spoken word. That's all he did, is just spoke the word and the seas formed. Spoke the word and the dry land formed. Spoke the word and trees formed. Spoke the word and grass and bushes formed. As a result of that, all of the vegetation that's on planet Earth, it started on day 3 of creation. Here's an interesting fact. This is really the first first living thing that God created in Genesis chapter 1. When he created the heavens and the earth, up to this point, we have objects in the sky and we have this ball of ground and waters. But when day 3 happens, God creates plants, living things on the earth, plants and trees and bushes. And God says at the end of each day of creation, it was good. He looked at it and said, wow, that's beautiful. What I just made is good. Now we're going to talk about trees in just a second. And parents, I'm going to give you an exercise to do with your whole family sometime this week in just a moment. But I want us to go back and I want us to now commit to memory Genesis chapter 1, verse 9 and verse 11 this week. And instead of separating the two verses, let's just memorize them together. So you ready? Here we go. Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 11. Then God said, let the waters beneath the sky float together into one place, so the dry ground may appear. And that's what happened. Then God said, let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant and trees that grow seed-bearing fruit. Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 11. Now, I want you to work, I realize this is a lot of material, but I want you to work at memorizing these two verses as a whole family. So parents, you commit this to memory. Parents, ask your children to commit this to memory. And each week, we don't want to just hear from the Bible. We want to be able to put it into our minds, and then from our minds, we want it to go into our heart and into our actions. So each week, I try to give an exercise. Normally, I'll give an exercise for little children, and then an exercise for your bigger children, because they're so smart, it's too easy for them to do the exercise for elementary age children. But tonight's exercise, sometime this week, is for the whole family. So here's what I want you to do. I'd like for you to go to a nursery, go to a store that sells potted plants, or go to some place that sells seeds. And I want you to get seeds, or you can even buy the sprout of a small tree. And if you own a house, or if you're in a place where you can plant a tree, a family tree, in your own yard or somewhere close by where you live, I want you to go plant a tree in your yard. If you don't live anywhere close by, I want you to take that seed or that little sprout and go to a park and find a spot in a park. And as a family, I want you to plant a tree, and this is going to become your family tree. That's why I want the whole family, parents, little children, middle schoolers, high schoolers, bring them all together and say, we're going to plant a tree, and this is going to become our family tree. And if this tree grows in years, we're going to have a strong tree. In 10 or 30 or 50 years, we're going to have a massive tree where your children or your grandchildren can come and look at this tree that you planted and that God caused to grow. Now that tree is going to need a little bit of attention, so you may have to put give it some water over the next few weeks. You may have to make sure that it doesn't get mowed over, so be careful where you plant it. But I want you to plant a family tree, because what you're doing as human beings created in the image of God is you are taking the act of creation and you are paying it forward. Now, you're not creating a tree. The tree is already inside the seed or inside the sapling, but you are making beautiful, or it was good. You're making something look beautiful where you plant this tree. Now, I said something really, really important last week. In fact, if you didn't watch last week's family Bible training, I want you to go back and watch that again sometime this week. But I'm going to carry the thought forward this week. One of the things that people use to try to undermine Christians' belief in the Bible, especially the belief in the 6 days of creation, is they try to say, if you look at the science, it says that those mountains are hundreds of millions of years old. It says that that light takes thousands or millions of light years to get to us from those distant galaxies. There's no way that the earth can be as young as the Bible claims it to be if God created everything in 6 days. And I'll just tell you the math. Somewhere around 8 or 10,000 years ago, he created everything in 6 literal days. They'll say there's no way for that to be possible. Because when we saw into trees, when we study the distance that it takes for light to get to earth, when we look at the age of the earth, we realize that it's millions or many hundreds of millions or billions of years old. And here's what I want you to understand. My son, my youngest son, and I took a trip to California when he was getting ready to finish high school. He wanted to go to the Yosemite Valley. I believe this is one of the most beautiful spots on earth. So we went camping in the Yosemite Valley. And because we were really close by, one of my favorite national parks, Yosemite Valley, Yellowstone, are probably 2 of my favorite national parks. But right up there, maybe number 3 on the list, is not far away from Yosemite, California. It's called the Giant Sequoia National Park. Parents, I want you to pull up on your tablet or on your computer some information. Go to the National Park Service and pull up some information about the giant sequoia trees in Northern California. These trees are, the reason I'm telling you about these trees tonight is because these trees are considered some of the oldest living plants on the earth. In fact, they're so massive. The reason why the name is Giant Sequoia is because they're so massive. This picture hasn't been photoshopped, that cars can drive through them, that they're so massive that you couldn't possibly get all the way around them. And I have stood more than once at the base of those giant sequoia trees and looked hundreds of feet in the air at what scientists believe it takes 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 years for the tree to grow as tall as it is today. So when you're standing there, you're seeing a tree. This is quite possibly a tree that was a baby sprout while Jesus was on earth. When Jesus was hanging on the cross on that tree in Jerusalem, it's possible that this tree was still on, that this tree was already on the earth. And you have a chance to go to Northern California. If you ever get there, go to the giant sequoia park. Here's what I want you to understand. When God created the plants on the earth, in one 24-hour period, he created all of the bushes. He created all of the trees. He created all of the grass and all of the beautiful plants, the many, many different varieties of beautiful plants. And he created the giant sequoia tree, which means if you were to go to Northern California on day 4 of creation, what you would see, I made this statement yesterday or last week. It's really important. Listen to what I say next. If you were to go on day 4 of creation, you wouldn't see a little sapling. You would see a full-grown giant sequoia tree on day 4. If you were to cut that tree in two and look at it, the rings of the tree would tell you that it's been around for many, many years, because what God created is fully developed and fully grown. So when people go back and look at the age of the earth and they use modern scientific equipment, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. What they fail to keep in mind is during those 6 days of creation, what God created was fully formed and fully developed. So the light is already making it to the earth on day 2 of creation. The giant sequoia trees are already fully grown, and it wouldn't have just one ring if you cut inside there and looked at the rings of the tree. It would have many rings because God made a fully formed tree on day 3 of creation. God didn't create babies when he made Adam and Eve. He made fully developed, fully grown human beings. This is why we don't ever have to shy away from the science. But the science doesn't undermine our views of 6 literal days of creation, because the Bible is telling us God created fully formed, fully developed stars in the sky and giant sequoia trees on earth. I hope tonight has been encouraging to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for family Bible training. Go out and get a seed, or go out and get a sapling and plant that tree and continue to carry forward God's creative, beautiful, good work of creation on the 3rd day, when God created the earth and the waters and made living things on the earth, when he made the trees and the bushes and the grass. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you have a great night. God bless.